everybody. We're back with a new podcast episode because that's what Danielle likes so much when I say that. With me, Woifi, and
Dani.
And this is Translating Love. Forgot that, but I think you already know that.
You already know that because every podcast episode is from Translating Love.
Right. Also, if you're listening to this, you probably listen to at least one or two other episodes. So
podcast episodes?
Yes. And you know that you're listening to this particular show that we're putting out there from the basement into the world.
Yep.
How are you today?
I'm good, but I'm tired.
Yeah, me too. I haven't
too.
slept very well. Yeah, full moon is coming up tonight.
Yep.
It's going to be fun. Thank you for everyone who is listening, who keeps listening, who is one of the OGs of the podcast. And feel free to share, rate, and whatever. But yeah, let's just go into the episode.
Let's do it.
We have talked about anxiety. If you have not listened to that episode, it's been a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, I feel like it was in the first few
It was
episodes.
April or May, something like that. And we saw that it was pretty well received.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore we thought, okay, let's try to go a little more into the symptoms of anxiety and how it affected our partnership and how it still kind of or partly affects us sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Less frequently
Less
now,
frequently, but still sometimes. Because, it's an interesting topic, and it's, I don't know, I think at least that was my thing when I was super deep in my anxiety. I listened to people just talking about it, and it just eased my mind a little bit, and hearing that other people are going through the same stuff helped me a lot.
Mm-hmm.
We have, I think we talked about the book from Joshua Fletcher, Panicking about
panic, or
yeah, I think something like that. We're going to link it again. If you are anxious, if you have anxious periods, or if you overall have heavy anxiety, you should totally read that book. It's
a really good starting point for understanding your own anxiety. Right. And then for me, and I'd said this in the last one that we talked about this, but it was like a starting point for me to figure out, okay, I don't have generalized anxiety, which is kind of what the book focuses on.
Yeah.
But a lot of it helped me to find, it was like the pushing point for me to look further into the type of anxiety that I have.
It's a lead-in into anxiety and just basically the basics of it, how to understand what it does in your body and and all the some of the bodily symptoms. But yeah, let's dive into the bodily symptoms. So I had, I still have health anxiety. That's my type of anxiety. And when I had it really, really heavy, 3 years ago, or 3.5 years, 3 years ago, I basically believed that I had cancer, and that thought or that belief kept coming back for a year, maybe a little longer. And with that belief, a lot of symptoms came along, and a lot of stuff that could potentially tell you that you have cancer. Nothing that tells you, oh, it's a red flag or something. Nothing super serious, but something that could be, a symptom of cancer. So my anxiety, basically, all the stuff in my head, all the wrong, like the testosterone, and what is the other one? We talked about it. The other one, adrenaline, right? Not testosterone, adrenaline, and I don't remember. Cortisol, right? Those two basically are mainly responsible for anxiety and for fight or flight, which is the response of your system towards that. And if you have anxiety, you're basically in a constant fight or flight moment where your body releases cortisol and adrenaline, thank you, like all the time. And sometimes a little too much, and then you have maybe a panic attack, or you're super heavy anxious. But
because it has nowhere else to go, it basically overproduces. It produces more than you actually need. Like in terms of the fight or flight response, you need it. You need that adrenaline in order to react to that situation. But when it's anxiety and when it's thoughts, you don't need adrenaline in that moment. And so that's why a lot of times people say like working out really helps with anxiety because you need to use the adrenaline that's being built up in your body.
Right. And with that, you basically experience a number of certain symptoms, which basically can be anything. Because you're focusing a lot on one thing, and whatever that is, if it's just like a thing that happens outside of your body that you're anxious about, you still experience some symptoms in your body that might be like, because you're stressed. That's what it is. You basically are super stressed inside. Your body goes through this really stressful, I don't know, it's not a moment, it's just a phase. And then, for example, you have to go to the toilet a lot. You have headaches. You have sweat. You're sweating. You experience like pounding of your heart. Like your heart feels
like where you can feel it pounding in your chest.
Right.
Those
Stuff
moments
like that.
where it's like you almost can hear it.
Yeah.
Because it's just so loud.
Stuff like that. Cramps. That's bloating. Tightness in your chest, back pain a lot, everything that can somehow hurt by being too stressed, being too cramped up, feeling too tight. That can hurt. That can feel weird. That can be uncomfortable. But for me, with my anxiety, since I focused on my body, on the symptoms, I basically overdeveloped. Or I basically I gave them too much attention. I focused so much on certain symptoms that they basically got super big and super massive in my head, and they felt massive. So I had those cramps and those, it was basically trapped gas for a month, and it hurt bad. I woke up and it just hurt super bad. And with that, I ran to the doctor a lot. I went to the hospital a lot. All the time.
I remember one time we went to the emergency room.
Yeah.
Because you just felt like something was really, really wrong.
Yeah.
And you didn't want to wait to go to the doctor. The doctor was closed, and you didn't want to wait until his office hours. It was probably a weekend, I guess.
No, it was.
So you would have had to wait until a Monday, or it was something like that. Yeah. And we ended up driving to the emergency room, and I think they did a blood test, and they just asked you some questions.
And then they felt like, and then they did like the heart rate monitor thing, and they did a bunch of tests, but basically nothing was wrong or nothing. They felt like, okay, that is serious. I got like not an endoscopy. I got like where they look down my stomach. What is it called? Like
that is an endoscopy.
No, endoscopy is through the
That's
butt.
coloscopy.
Oh, really?
Colonoscopy.
Oh, colonoscopy.
But
right.
Endoscopy is the one that goes through your mouth and down through your throat.
Yeah, I got that. So they looked at in my stomach if everything was fine, and I mean there was just like a little inflammation in there because most likely of stress, and which I had a lot during that time. That was basically through the last years of my master's. And I got a lot of tests done. I basically waited as long as possible to not go to the doctor, and then at some point there was this point like I can't do it anymore and go to the doctor again and try to tell him, hey, something feels really off, something is wrong with me. One of my biggest things was I hadn't had like good poop, and we're back at the poop. Like I had the worst bowel movements. I went to the toilet multiple times a day, and it was the worst. Nothing with red flags, but still not good. And cramps and bloating all the time. And with that also came like dizziness and nausea and it was horrible. It was horrible. And it's funny because looking back at it and seeing what it did to me and how I changed a lot, because I mean, we didn't go out as much. I tried to avoid being in places where I didn't feel comfortable. And also one of the biggest thing for me was if I went somewhere, I always thought about, okay, where's the next doctor? Where's the next hospital? Just in case something would happen. I planned everything around that.
I didn't know that you did that.
Yeah, I did that. It was horrible. I basically, from week to week, I planned my doctor's visit. It was like, okay, my doctor's having his office hours during this time, so I could go there, stuff like that. It was horrible. And it consumed my life at the end. And I think...
So how did that then, just moving into away from like the symptoms of it and more into how you think it affected...
Right, that's what I just wanted to say.
Relationship.
Yeah, I think it affected a lot of our relationship, not only because I was so consumed with my thoughts and with my fears and anxiety that we didn't really do that much during that time. I mean, we still did stuff, but I remember, I mean, going to the cinema or going to get some food somewhere, I wasn't really there. I had this back thought in my head all the time. And coming home in this like safe space, I always felt better, but the symptoms weren't gone. And I think I was so invested in my stuff that was going on that I think I didn't really pay that much attention to the relationship, kind of. Not that I just let it, like, I don't know.
I wouldn't necessarily say to the relationship. I would just say you weren't as able to be there for me because I also had high anxiety at the same time.
Right.
We were both basically in like peaks of anxiety at the same time. And so I think you were less attentive to my anxiety and less able to like be there for me at that time. And that also, I think that was one of the hardest things for me because I felt like even though I was super high anxiety, I was like trying to be there for you as much as I could. But I sometimes would feel like, okay, but maybe he doesn't see mine at all. Maybe he doesn't see that I'm struggling too, or that maybe you just didn't care. And I think that was for me.
Yeah, I mean, for me,
hard.
I mean, we talked.
And I mean, it kind of was. I think it still affects you today, not the anxiety aspect, but what came out of it. Because there was such a long period where you didn't, and maybe I'm wrong here, but there was such a long period where you never really asked me, hey, how are you? How are you doing? And it resorted to you now. You have a reminder in your phone every, I don't know, 2 weeks or something. I don't know what you set it to in your phone.
Nah, a little more than that.
But that it like pops up in your phone for you to ask me how I'm doing. And which is sweet, but I think there's also like a part of me that's like, okay, why does he need a reminder on his phone to ask me how I'm doing? And I think it might possibly stem a little bit from the time during anxiety because you just weren't used to asking it and you weren't used to. Might be true.
I mean, I wasn't always the best person in terms of that. But I mean, sure, there were multiple times I remember we fought or we talked about that you needed more attention or you needed more affection from me.
Affection's a better word.
That I wasn't able to give you that much because I didn't have the energy or the headspace, or that at least that's what I told myself.
Yeah, that's what you told me too.
No, I know.
I think that's how it felt to you. It felt like you didn't have the space, and it felt like you didn't have the capacity to focus on not only your daily life and things that had to be done, but then also focus on your anxiety and focus on fixing that.
Thankfully, I was functioning while having my like hardest times, and I was still getting things done, but it was exhausting, and I think I could have done a much better job with certain things if I would have not been in that phase. But I mean, I had to go through that, obviously. But yeah, I think a big part of that whole phase where I was constantly scanning my body for symptoms, for new symptoms, for things that don't feel regular, for things that feel odd, running to the doctor, going to the doctor and stuff like that. I was lacking, I don't know, affection.
Mm-hmm.
I was lacking giving you attention, or I don't know.
It was more affection, I think, because even, we've talked about, like, in the love languages, I like physical touch a lot, and words of affirmation, I think, was my number one. And I think during that time especially, I like to snuggle, and I like to, like, when we're watching a movie or something, or if we're walking somewhere, sometimes I like if he holds my hand or kisses me once in a while. I like those things throughout the day. And during that time, it felt like it was just, there would sometimes be days where we would go where you wouldn't kiss me for days.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it was just, he wasn't even thinking about it. It was like, you were just so in your head somewhere else, and so focused on your physical symptoms, and so focused on trying to figure out what's going on with you, that literally nothing else even crossed your mind. And it wasn't, I don't think it was that you didn't care, or that but I remember sometimes I would ask you, like, don't you miss this? Don't you miss, like, kissing me or being affectionate with me? And you never really seemed like you, or the way that you would respond to that is that you don't even think about that it hasn't been happening.
Yeah. I just wasn't aware.
Yeah.
It was not my focus at this point. I was basically, at my worst part, I was like thinking that I would die in 5 months. Mm-hmm. It seems, first of all, I'm sorry for anyone who experienced something like that, or like a real life-threatening disease, or who knows someone who died, or who suffers from something like that. But yeah, in my worst place, I was really convinced. I convinced myself that I had something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it might sound weird, but that's how it was. And so I don't know. It sounds so backwards, because you try to think, okay, if you have something like that, then you try to enjoy the last couple of months that you have. But in my head, it was just like, I need to find out what's wrong with me. I need to find out what's causing all those symptoms, and going to the doctor and stuff like that just consumed me, and I had no time for anything else besides working and university stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It was just too much. All of it was too much. But I thought about it. I still think about it, and I still I'm still aware of all that stuff, or most of it that happened back then. And I'm really thankful that I went through that. And especially with COVID right now, I imagining being like that, like I was in like 2 years ago, 3 years ago, with COVID, I would be a wreck.
Yeah.
And anyone who's going through that right now, I feel you, and you can totally do that. But that's like not, I don't know. Sure, health anxiety focus, and some people think like they have a brain tumor and they have headaches all the time. Some people think they have like heart problems because like their heart rate is so high or so irregular or something like that. People focus on certain points in their body and believe, okay, they might be sick, or they have something really bad. But with COVID being around and you're already focused on your health a lot, that's not a good combination. So I'm thankful that I'm through all that stuff. And I just can look back at it and say, okay, I'm done with that for now. But I wonder how did you experience like the time, or how was it for you seeing me like that, or going to the doctor all the time, or asking you about that stuff?
It made me sad that you felt like you could die at some point. And because I also have anxiety, I don't have health anxiety, but I think anxiety, no matter what you have, it plays off of each other, and it plays off of other anxieties. And so there were times when you would be like in the really, really heavy phases of it. And I would think, oh my God, what if he dies? Like, what if we're putting this off as like, it's nothing, it's fine, it's anxiety, you're healthy. But then there's that what if, like, oh my God, what if? And what if it's something terrible? And what do I do? And how would I go on without him?
So wait, you always lied to me saying, oh, everything's fine, you're healthy?
No. Why would you put it like that?
No, I'm kidding.
But why would you put it like that? I was like the most
Danielle.
supportive person.
I know, I'm kidding, Danielle. She's shaking her head.
Yeah.
And now she's rolling her eyes.
Yeah. You asked me a question and giving you an answer.
No.
And you joke about my answer. No, but it causes that. It would cause that with anybody. I
totally understand that. Yeah, I totally understand.
I don't want to think of a life without you. And so to know that you're so panicked about potentially not being alive in a year or 5 years or whatever. Sure, I thought about that. Nobody would not think. There's not a single person who wouldn't think about that if their partner is so panicked about something. But
maybe a partner wants the partner to die.
Wow. But no, I mean, it wasn't easy for me, not just because of the things that I felt and like not really feeling affection and not really feeling like, I mean, it affected my anxiety too in terms of because I have relationship anxiety. And so not getting the affection from you made my anxiety trigger go to, he doesn't love me. He's not attracted to me anymore. He doesn't want to look at me anymore. He doesn't want to touch me. You know, all of those things then came up in relation to my own anxiety. And so that was also hard to try to convince myself and tell myself that what's happening has nothing to do with me. And it has nothing to do with how you feel about me. Yeah. But that was a super big challenge for me to that's think about that.
I think that's
like understand that.
That's a good point. We talked about this in the relationship anxiety and the health anxiety podcast episode. Right, the things that happen to you or the things that you feel or the things that you think have nothing to do with another person. It stems just from you. Sure, there are triggers. Sure, there are things that trigger you. But overall, it's just it's from yourself. It's coming from yourself. It's something that stems from you. And therefore, only you can fix it. That's something I had to learn because going to the doctor, getting affirmation, getting positive feedback that everything's fine, getting the test results back, stuff like that, helped for like a few hours or days. But then I fell back into this, but what if?
Like what if they were wrong? What if they missed something? What if,
And that's I think that's with every anxiety, at least from what I've read, is that sure you can get like the confirmation from people like, hey, maybe, I mean, it's with you too. You ask me like, hey, do you still love me? Or hey, do you find me attractive? Blah, blah. And I can tell you, yes, I do. But with anxiety, after a couple of hours, days, weeks, the what ifs come back. And in order to get rid of those things.
Although with mine, it's slightly different. And it is true in the sense of when I ask for affirmation, then it's like, okay, maybe I feel good for an hour. Maybe I feel good for 2 hours. Maybe I feel good for a couple of days. Yeah. When it's given to me without me asking, that's when it's the most beneficial because you're coming to me and saying, I just really love you. Or, you know, like something that's so out of the blue or you're really sexy or whatever it might be, just something sweet that you do or say that for me is like, okay, I didn't have to ask for that. That's just him coming to me and genuinely saying that. And that really helps me.
That's what I like about my doctor. He calls me once a month and tells me that I'm healthy. No, but I totally obvious if you don't feed the anxiety and if you get affirmation or if you get something positive, that helps you. Sure. But if you try to basically get rid of those thoughts by asking for exactly what you want to hear, and most of the time, hopefully you hear that, then it doesn't bring you anything. It doesn't make it worse, but it also doesn't make it better.
Well, and that's the thing whenever you would say that you were going to the doctor, you were not sure if you should go to the doctor, but you were like, maybe I should go, maybe I shouldn't. He's only open for blah, 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 X amount of time. I typically would try to say things like, if you feel like it'll help you, go. But not to say anything that would be, yeah, you should go if you feel that way. You know, like, you know, or just, yeah, you really need to get that checked out. That doesn't sound good.
Yeah.
It was more like, I wouldn't even say if you feel like you should. I would say things like, if you think it will help you, is how I tried to phrase it.
I remember
if
you
you
never
think it will
pushed
help
me,
you, then
but you also
go.
said things like, maybe wait until Monday or something like that.
See if it goes away, or wait till tomorrow even, or yeah.
But I remember I saw some pictures of when your brother was here in May of 2018. And I remember that I was like super deep into anxiety during the time. But when he and his friend Phil were here,
Bondi.
Shout out to Bondi, to my butterfly, or I'm a Schmetterling. When they were here this week, I felt fine. Like most of my symptoms were gone, and I felt almost normal. And when they were gone, I fell back into it. And that was like one of the first like eye-opening times, or that was that was the moment where I was almost already convinced I had anxiety. But that summer basically helped me. That summer I get really rid of the whole thing, thankfully. But yeah, it's so weird that how your body, if you're so consumed with your body and with everything that's going on and with your thoughts, and something rips you out of that, some event or something happens, then all of a sudden it's gone. It's gone. If you're not focusing in it, if you're not feeding it, then it can be paused. It basically is paused.
Well, and I think the reason that you figured it out, that was a thing while they were here, because technically you have that every day, but I think because it's in your routine, you don't see it that way. Like, you have to work every day, and typically when you're working, you're not thinking about it as much. If you have something you have to do,
I thought about it all the time.
But if there were things like if you had to go film something, if you had to physically do something other than just sit at the computer,
no, sure,
I guess that those moments also probably brought you out of it, but you just didn't notice that it brought you out of it because it's so part of your daily routine.
It was more the time frame. It was more the time frame.
And that this was like a longer stretch of like, it's a distraction. We had to help them like drive them places and help them with stuff because of the language and because they were doing music stuff here. Yeah. So I think it was just so much of a distraction for you that it completely brought you away from it.
Exactly. I was basically like I was on vacation somewhere and had every day planned with a lot of fun and exciting stuff. And it was the same. People came here and I had to drive them things. I had to organize stuff. They had to meet people. We drove up to the Czech Republic. Yeah, we did a lot of stuff. Every day was planned completely. And it took me out of the whole anxiety routine that my body was basically set into at this point. And when they left, I fell back into the whole thing and the whole cycle, and it obviously started again. But I was basically, that was a big part of healing myself and getting rid of all those shitty thoughts. Let's take a break. And we're back. So,
see, for you, it's a break. For you listeners, it's actually a break. But for us, it's just, let's take a break and then a couple seconds pause and we're back.
Yeah, right. That's the magic of podcast. But away from my anxiety, let's focus on your anxiety now. That sounds bad. Let's talk about your anxiety now. Just quickly give a little background of your anxiety, and then
for those who maybe haven't listened to the other episodes, or just as a reminder, I have what is known as relationship anxiety, which doesn't mean I am afraid of relationships, but rather that when I'm in them, I tend to worry a lot about, it's a lot about self-confidence or lack of self-confidence. It stems a lot from just bad relationships in the past, people who didn't treat me right, me being an asshole in relationships too. just kind of an unhealthy pattern with a lot of relationships. And so it's more like I'm so concerned that I think about things like, oh, he's going to leave me for somebody else, or, oh, he's not attracted to me anymore because of like literally maybe there's a couple days that feel a little weird, or I'm over analyzing things. And in our case, it more stemmed with like he's still in contact with 2 of his exes. One is more just like a once in a while, hey, how's it going? And the other one was more friendly, and I think we talked about that too on the podcast, where she was somebody that you would talk to about depression when we had just started dating.
On the ex podcast,
and so it was like really, really intimate conversation with his ex. And then they are also like pretty decent friends and would talk about really personal things, and that just made me uncomfortable. So that was honestly, I think probably the worst of my anxiety came from that relationship.
But what are like your what are the worst scenario thoughts in that anxiety type? Because for me, it's like, okay, I'm going to die of cancer, blah, blah, blah. But what is it for you?
I mean, for me, it's he doesn't love me anymore. He isn't attracted to me. He is cheating on me, or he's flirting with other people behind my back. Things that I know you would never actually do. And that's the problem with relationship anxiety, is that it's typically, and I don't want to speak for everybody, but typically it's not that you don't trust that person, because that's the weird conundrum of the whole thing. You trust them. I mean, I trust you more than I've trusted anybody ever in any relationship. And you still have those thoughts. You still have what if he's cheating on me? What if he would cheat on me? What if he gets back together with his ex? What if he's still attracted to her and he's not telling me? You know, things like that, where it's almost as if the fact that you trust them doesn't matter. And it's so shitty.
Yeah, and then you overanalyze, you're over... like you see things, you're misinterpret things, you're observant.
Like overly observant to the point where it's
I think that was a big part for you or for us, because I noticed that you've been overly observant. You constantly ask me about something.
I mean, by overly observant, I'll give you an example for people who might not understand what we mean by that. But if you're like sitting next to somebody and they're on their phone, you can easily see what they're doing if you're right next to them. But typically, even from your peripheral vision, like from peripherals, you can see maybe who they're talking to. Maybe not the content of what they're saying, but who they're talking to. But when it's, and it's not like you're snooping or you're whatever, it's just you notice things because you're next to them. But when you have anxiety like this, if you notice the wrong thing or something that's triggering for you, so like for example, this person's name, so his ex's name, or some woman that I don't know that he seems to be really chatty with all of a sudden. And it's just things like that. Then you're really observant. And so then your head goes to things like, what are they talking about? And how long have they been talking? Do they talk often? Do they call each other? Do they, it's like it goes from 0 to 160 seconds.
And then if you think about, I'm in my anxiety state where I don't show as much as affection, that plays into her anxiety and gives her more anxiety and more thoughts,
because it fuels the other anxious thoughts, where it's like, oh, this is my proof, this is like more evidence leading to he's not as affectionate with me lately, and all of a sudden he's talking to his ex a lot more, and so you put those two things together as if they fit together.
It's a really shitty combination. But the thing is, almost everything is a combination of anxiety, because you get those things, you ask for the things, and you create them, right?
You create the scenarios in your head, so you connect anything that you possibly can, even if there's no connection there.
Even if it's just a weird goodbye or just a weird text or something like that. It's like just things that you wouldn't even notice. Or the way that your face looks when you're texting somebody. Even that is something I would observe. Like there are certain people he texts where he has this like little smile on his face where he looks, it's just a weird, you create things that aren't there. So that they fit with your theories that are in your head. And that is like the biggest point, or that was a big point for us, because it was not always easy to first of all, it took you a long time to acknowledge the fact that you had this kind of thing, or that you figured out what you have and how to call it.
And I think that was also hard for you to understand, because even though it took you probably the same amount of time to understand that you had anxiety, because you had already figured out that you had anxiety by the time I was starting to figure it out, I think for you it was like, because it was so clear to you, you have anxiety, this is what it is. Yeah. It was frustrating for you that I couldn't see that, or that I wouldn't acknowledge that.
It was frustrating to me because you didn't believe me at first.
I don't know if I would say believe, because I did say it was
but you
anxiety.
You weren't convinced yourself. That was the thing. You believed me, but you weren't really convinced.
I believed that it was anxiety, but not to the extent of what it was. Not that that's the only thing that's making me feel like this.
Right.
Because my anxiety was telling me that all these things were true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there was always like friction. There was always like I was frustrated because she didn't believe me when I told her things, or she asked me so much of stuff. Then she was frustrated.
You probably felt like I didn't trust you, which was that was such a hard thing for us to, because since I didn't really know how to explain it yet, because I didn't know what it was. Yeah. I couldn't really explain to you that I trust you, but I know it doesn't seem like I do, because I didn't understand it myself yet. And so I think it was really hard for you to believe that I trusted you, because you didn't understand my anxiety just as I didn't understand it.
Yeah. It was not a easy situation.
Nope.
And figuring it out and trying to move forward and trying to also talk about it. And I don't know, for you getting rid of it or getting rid of your thoughts, because I can't take them away for you as you can take away my thoughts. I think that was the hardest thing for both of us, because you can tell the person, like I tell you all the time, or I told you a lot that I'm having no feelings for whatever person. I still love you and all those things. But in the end, you still weren't convinced of it. There was still a what if in your head. And then all those little things happened that you observed, or that you saw, or that you think you saw. And you put those thoughts together, and all of a sudden it made sense again.
And I have to say, I mean, I think one thing that's good for us now is, because we both understand our anxieties so well now, that it also helps us to understand each other's anxieties. Because if this were 2 years ago, I wouldn't really be able to, I don't think, tell you that the way you are in your anxiety fuels my anxiety, like how we had just talked about, like you not being affectionate fuels my other thoughts and makes them more real. Yeah. I don't think we could have had that conversation 2 years ago.
Probably not, no.
Because we didn't understand enough about our own anxieties and how we act while in those high anxiety times, and how it affected each other. And I think that knowing that now helps us to kind of avoid certain things.
Yep.
And
no, totally. But what were did you have bodily symptoms when you were super anxious?
I mean, I couldn't sleep. I had a lot of trouble sleeping, at least falling asleep. Once I fell asleep, I was okay, but I could not fall asleep for hours. A lot of times my heart would be racing, just racing, where you're laying there, sitting there, and you feel it. Like I could literally hear my heartbeat in my head.
That's a good point.
It's almost like when you have a migraine.
Yeah.
When you have a really bad migraine, you feel the thumping in your head. It was like that without the migraine.
That's a good point. It was
just thumping.
With the heart rate, if you're anxious, you shouldn't drink coffee. You should avoid the caffeine. Just cut it out. Caffeine, sorry. You should just cut it out completely. I did. Yeah. I didn't drink coffee for 1.5 years or longer even.
Now we drink it every day.
Now we drink it a lot again. Not a lot, but still, yeah. But yeah.
I don't know, other than...
I think your bowel movements were also not that great, right?
It depended on the day. So for the most part, it was normal. But if we would have a fight, or if there would be one day that's like way more anxious than the others, where I just couldn't get out of my head at all, then I would have really bad digestion for days after that. And I mean, it's still like that every time we fight. I have just terrible digestion for like 2 days.
The best poop when you fight.
It's nice.
No, I don't. But yeah.
I mean, I don't know how much this has to do with it because it was also at a time where I'd started studying.
Mm-hmm.
And I started studying in October of 2018. Migraines. And shortly before I started studying, I think like in September, I had migraines for weeks, like weeks, where it would be one migraine that didn't go away for 2 weeks. And then it finally went away for a week. And then another one came back. And it was like that probably until December.
Yeah, that's a long time.
It was miserable.
I mean, sure, that can be part of it, or at least
I think it was part of it. But
the thing is, the migraine might not been part of the anxiety, but your anxiety fueled it, or your anxiety made it worse. That could be a part.
Yeah, it was really so bad.
Yeah.
So I don't know how much that was related.
But yeah, it's interesting because as we said in the beginning of this episode, your body, it's a normal function. The fight or flight thing is completely normal, and your body produces those hormones, and they get released, and then all of those symptoms start to happen.
No.
But if you have anxiety all the time, that basically becomes a new normal in your body, and that just happens, and your body's basically just in this. I don't know, in this cycle where it just happens, and then you react, then you get anxious, then you feel all those things, and that happens again, and it's a vicious cycle. Worst case, you have a panic attack, which is not nice.
That also happened to me a couple of times.
Yeah, but it's the whole thing, the whole takeaway of that is it's normal. It's nothing that can hurt you.
Your anxiety can't hurt you.
Nothing that you can die of, nothing that is serious. And a big thing for me also was, and I think for you too, is that the anxiety comes in waves, especially if you start feeling better. You have those phases where you feel great and you're like, oh, fuck, I'm finally through this thing.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it hits you again. And then it feels worse.
It feels worse and really heavy because you haven't experienced it in a while. So it's almost like you have to readjust to anxiety.
Yeah.
And I mean, I just want to quickly touch on like what helped me.
Mm-hmm.
The weird thing is I can't exactly put a pin in it and say this helped. This is why I don't feel it as much. But in some ways, I can at least say that a big part of it for me was that we were able to finally talk with each other more and starting to understand each other's anxieties, but also that you understood mine a little better as I started to understand it.
Yeah.
And sharing those things with each other.
Yeah.
I think another big thing is that you started to be more, I think it's become less now, but it's because I don't need it as much. But you would be more open about like just talking. If you had a conversation with your ex, you would just randomly bring it up in a conversation. So not I would have to ask, hey, when was the last time you talked to her? Because that sounds ridiculous. But more that you would just say like casually, oh, we talked about this today, or oh, she said something really funny today, something like that.
Yeah.
And that also, at first it was hard, but it helped, I think, overall. Because then it didn't feel like it was being hidden.
Yeah.
And I think the things that really, really helped me was starting to learn to love myself, because a big part of my anxiety, and I think anyone who has relationship anxiety, is a lack of self-confidence. And I really had zero self-confidence for a really long time when I came, at least about like my physical appearance and my, not necessarily my skills, because I think I have confidence in things I'm able to do, but just in me as a woman, as a partner. Yeah. And I think trying to build those things has been super helpful. And in the last few months, especially, I felt very, very little anxiety because I decided to stop wearing makeup, and I now officially love my face without makeup. Like when I see pictures of myself wearing makeup, I'm like, it doesn't look good. I don't think I look good at all. What was I thinking?
That's what I kept telling you.
You didn't tell me that it didn't look good. You
said it looked but I remember the times where you still wore makeup, and that like at night or in the morning, I told you that you look beautiful without it.
Mm-hmm. You used to tell me you loved my no makeup face.
Yeah, I love no makeup faces.
But so that has been like I can't remember the last time I put makeup on. It was before March.
Yeah. But yeah,
but things like that, and like learning to be accepting of my body, how it is, and not being so obsessed with trying to get a flatter stomach or trying to, you know, just do the things that make you feel good, work out if it makes you feel good, but don't if you don't want to, and be conscious of what you eat, but don't be restrictive, and don't be, and just love your body for what it is. And that has been such a game changer for my anxiety.
I think anxiety, that's a good point. I think with anxiety is you should listen to your body more.
Yeah.
And your body tells you what you need and what you shouldn't do. And with all of, like, coffee, for example, is something that you shouldn't put in your body if you feel anxious. Coffee is fine.
Or alcohol.
Moderate. Yeah, that was the next thing. Alcohol. Heavy foods, stuff that is really hard to digest, greasy foods, especially unhealthy shit, you should not put in your body if you feel super anxious. And that's just something that I think we both had to learn a little bit more, to be more conscious. I mean, with that, the vegan thing came along, and with being vegan, I'm not preaching anything, but you're just more aware of what you put in your body. Yeah. That's just how it is, because you look at everything that's in there. And you're just a little more conscious of, what do I put in my body right now?
Yeah.
And mostly with the vegan stuff, you eat healthier. I'm not saying that vegans are healthy, because there's so much shit that is vegan. But mostly, if you eat like a good plant-based diet, you eat healthier.
Yeah.
And that alone helped a lot. And yeah, we don't drink alcohol a lot. We cut out coffee until we felt our bodies felt like, okay, we can handle it again. And then again, being aware of anxiety is not something that just goes away. You have to actively work to make it better. If that's CBD, CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, just therapy, just talking about it.
I don't know, I think in the relationship anxiety episode about the journaling, where you carry like a small journal around, and you, every time you have an anxious thought, you write it down in as short a way as possible. And then you instantly also write a positive change to that. So make that anxiety, make that anxious thought positive.
Yeah.
And the more you do it, the more it helps. And that seriously helped me
it does.
much. And it's not to say I don't have it. I mean, I still have anxious thought patterns about, like, sometimes I'll see that he's texting somebody or texting some woman that I'm a little uncomfortable with, and it's not like those thoughts are gone. They are still there, but I've learned to handle them, control them a little better. And if they stick around a little too long, I might ask him about it, but I approach it in a different way. And I approach it in a way that's not based on anxiety, but rather in a, hey, I just need to get this out of my head. And sometimes that's enough. And we try to, he's also gotten a lot better. You've gotten better at not reacting to those questions as me, like, accusing you of something, but rather for what it is, where it's just, hey, this has been in my head way too long and I just need to get it out.
Yep.
So I think that's also important.
It's a constant progress of work.
But I also wanted to ask you, because you asked me, what was the hardest part when I was in the heaviest?
I mean, you said it already. I felt
the anxiety.
I felt like I had to hide things, or I had to be aware of certain things, or certain things to say, or certain things to express because of your anxiety. Because certain words, certain phrases, something like that could trigger things. And then also I have the feeling of, you are not trusting me, stuff like that. And then, I mean, the fights, because I felt attacked.
That's also kind of
I felt you don't trust me, or I felt I have to constantly explain myself. That was not easy for me.
I think that's also kind of like an ironic thing, I guess it's a way to say it, but you saying that you felt like you had to hide things because there's things you couldn't say or could say, but in reality that made the anxiety worse.
Obviously.
So if you did hide something, or I wouldn't say hide is the right word, but just choose not to share something or say something, and then it ended up coming up way later, then I would get anxious about the fact that you didn't tell me it sooner. And so that's kind of an ironic. And how do you feel about it now? Like, how do you feel about how, like, where it was last year versus where it is now in terms of mine?
I'm much better. I mean, there's still certain days where I can feel that you're anxious, and then you do then you most of the time have this phase of where you go through your head how to say it, how to approach it, and I can basically instantly tell that you do that because you do certain things, you behave a certain way, and it's just a pattern. You just do that, and then okay, she's going to ask me something, or you're feeling something and you're trying to figure out how to ask it. So I'm more aware of that things, and so I try to not be as reactive and try to not.
But do you feel like that happens less?
No,
like,
way less. Yeah.
Like it's not like multiple times a week or even once a week, really, that you would.
Once a month, maybe, if even. I don't know. I don't count it.
And with the whole like trust thing, how is that for you?
I mean, I know that you trust me. The thing is, it's also something I have to accept that it's not you, it's your anxiety that.
I mean, it's essentially the same as the way that the things that you do aren't because of me or have nothing to do with me, even though they might feel that way.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of the same thing where it may feel a certain way, but it's in reality not even close to that.
Yeah, it's just a what if, and it's just a thought, and it's the worst case most of the time.
But I hope that it's at least gotten better, that you
can
actually believe and trust that I.
No, it got better, but it got better. That's what I mean. That's we wouldn't be here right now if it didn't get better. But yeah, I mean, again, if you're in a similar situation, if you experience anxiety, if you are going through anxiety, there are a lot of things you can do. The book we mentioned.
It's really helpful. And honestly, it's such a quick read. I am the slowest reader in the entire world. And I think I read that book in 3 days,
it's a
couple of hours total.
A fast read.
It's a great book.
Yeah. And a lot of other books, videos online. There are a lot of things that you can do. And just keep working on it and be aware that it comes in waves.
Yeah.
And that's a good sign, because that means you're doing something and it gets better.
Yeah.
And the day will come where you are free of all that shit. And you can look back at it and say, I'm glad that I went through that, because I'm stronger now. Yeah. I know more about myself, about my body. And I can kick ass.
As weird as it is, the anxiety, when you do the work to try to overcome it, or at least understand it, it brings you closer to yourself.
It does.
You know yourself so much better,
because you have to basically work with yourself, with your body, with your thoughts.
And I think there are benefits to being in a relationship with somebody who also has anxiety, whether or not it's the same type of anxiety as yours. Yeah. That's also really important to remember. There are different types of anxiety.
Yeah.
No two are exactly alike. But I think it's helpful, and it can also be shitty, because if you're both at the same time in really high anxious states, it can be really straining on the relationship.
Yeah, obviously.
But just as, I mean, on the other side, I think it's really hard to be in a relationship with somebody who doesn't have anxiety and you do have anxiety.
It's hard to explain.
I would imagine that's really, really hard, because it's hard to understand it if you don't.
It is really hard to understand it, yeah. And I don't wish it upon anyone.
No.
But yeah, it's hard to understand it, and it's probably easier if you have someone around you that understands it.
But that's not to say it's not possible if you're with somebody who doesn't have anxiety.
Obviously.
Just do what you need to help them understand it. Don't get mad at them for not understanding. And if you're the partner who doesn't have it, try to understand it. Read about it on your own time.
Yeah.
That also shows that you care.
Yeah.
Try to talk to your partner or talk to friends or something that also have it, so you can understand a little bit what it feels like.
Yep.
Because then you can be there for your partner. Yeah.
I think that's it.
So
yeah, I hope you enjoyed this episode. And I know it's not an easy topic, but if you did, please subscribe or follow this podcast. Give it a rating on Stitcher or Apple Podcast, and share this episode with people.
It's super helpful if you even just share it in your story on Instagram, or like from Spotify, or I don't know what other. I don't know if you can do it with other, like
no,
Google.
But with
I don't
Spotify,
think you can.
You can share it
with Spotify, you can share the episode on your story, and it's super easy, and it really helps us.
Yeah. And if you want to support us, there's this thing on our Anchor page, anchor.fm/translating-love. You can look into it. We really appreciate it. But yeah, we really appreciate your love, and thank you for listening.
Thanks for listening.
Bye.
Bye.